Hello, my dear friends. For 14 years, I was the first one in and the last one out. I didn't take sick days, I didn't take credit. I just kept things running. And in the end, they replaced me with the CEO's daughter. But what they didn't realize was, this company wasn't held together by meetings or titles or strategy decks. It was held together by me. And I was about to show them what happens when you try to steal the heartbeat of something you never understood. My name is Evan Ross. I'm 45 years old, and until a few months ago, I was the director of operations at Greenwave Logistics. If you've never heard of Greenwave, that's fair. We weren't flashy. We didn't ship the newest tech or deliver flowers on Valentine's Day. We moved things like tires, palletized medical supplies, copper wire reels, unsexy things. But we moved them perfectly. We didn't miss deadlines. Not in winter storms. Not during the pandemic. Not during fuel shortages. Why? Because of a system I built from the ground up. A system that turned chaos into predictability. That made freight tracking across 12 regional hubs feel as seamless as clicking a button. It wasn't magic. It was just years of listening, adjusting, and knowing the bones of the operation better than anyone else ever would. And I didn't build it because someone asked me to. I built it because when I got to Greenwave, it was broken. 14 years ago, I walked into a warehouse that was one ransomware attack away from collapse. The team was using spreadsheets printed on paper. There were manual logs for truck arrivals, handwritten logs like it was 1992. The whole system was being held together by duct tape and last-minute phone calls to drivers named Rick and Sammy who didn't even own smartphones. I wasn't hired to lead anything. I was brought in as a stopgap. The real IT lead had quit a week before a massive client contract launched. They were desperate and I was available. I'd just gone through a brutal divorce. My house was gone. My weekends were gone. My sense of direction in life? Gone. All I had left was my ability to write code and build things that worked. So I stayed. At first, just to feel useful. Then I started fixing things. The first thing I built was a basic tracking dashboard. Something to help warehouse managers see which trucks were delayed and which ones were idling in the yard. It took me 2 nights and a case of energy drinks. By the end of that week, late shipments dropped by 12%. They didn't say thank you, but they noticed. So I kept going. I wrote a scheduling algorithm that redistributed load pickup windows to reduce fuel costs. Then I automated the daily manifest generator. I built a secure internal messaging system so dispatchers didn't have to rely on WhatsApp to coordinate freight. And somewhere along the way, the patches turned into a platform. I named it Pulse, because that's what it felt like, Greenwave's first real heartbeat. By year 5, I had full control over operations tech. The warehouse floors were humming. Delivery tracking was real-time. Forecasting accuracy was above 92%. I was no longer a stopgap. I was the system, but I didn't ask for a promotion. I didn't fight to be on the leadership team. I stayed in the background. I liked it that way. The servers didn't care about credit. The code didn't gossip. And when something broke at 2 a.m., I knew I could fix it without filling out a single form. I was never ambitious in the traditional sense. I didn't want to climb the ladder. I wanted to make sure the ladder didn't collapse. So I kept my head down. I worked. I improved. I made the company stronger with every line of code I wrote, every contingency plan I tested. Greenwave grew. From 2 warehouses to 9. From regional to multi-state. My system scaled with it. And the executives? They noticed. Or at least, they noticed the results. At the 2019 company holiday party, I remember Martin Kemp, our CEO, shaking my hand in front of the entire team. "You turned us into a modern operation," he said, smiling. "We couldn't have done it without you." I didn't say much. Just nodded and thanked him. But inside, something lit up. Maybe I finally mattered. Then COVID hit. Supply chains went haywire. Clients pulled contracts. Drivers quit. Warehouses became ghost towns. Everyone was panicking. Except us. Because Pulse didn't panic. Pulse adapted. I added new modules for contactless pickups. Rewrote route prioritization based on hospital supply demand. Built a contact tracing tool in less than a week for on-site staff. The board sent Martin a message: "Greenwave is one of the few logistics partners we're keeping through this." I never saw the email, of course, but I knew it came. Because 2 days later, Martin offered me a raise and told me, "You're not just our backbone, Evan. You're our future." Turns out, even backbones get broken. Not with a hammer, not with a warning, but with a 12-minute meeting in a room with no windows. It happened on a Tuesday. I got a meeting invite from Martin. No agenda, no prep materials, just leadership alignment update. I walked into conference room 4B at 11 a.m. wearing the same navy button-up I'd worn every Tuesday for years. I thought maybe it was about expanding Pulse into the new Dallas hub. But when I walked in, she was already there. Talia Kemp, Martin's 27-year-old daughter, freshly graduated from Wharton. Sharp blazer, perfect posture, $1,000 tablet on the table, and a folder with my name on it. I knew before Martin said a word. Martin didn't waste time. He gestured toward the empty seat across the glass table and said, "Let's make this brief." His voice was rehearsed, too calm for what he was about to do. Talia sat upright, hands clasped in front of her, eyes focused somewhere just above my shoulder. She didn't smile, didn't greet me, just sat there like someone who'd already taken my seat in every way but physically. "Evan," Martin began, "you've been the bedrock of this company for more than a decade. And I want you to know how deeply grateful we all are." That was the first knife. Gratitude. The second came quickly. But as we move into a new phase, strategic expansion, automation scaling, and eventually positioning for outside investment, we're also reevaluating leadership. We need bold voices, digital native perspectives, people who are fluent in innovation. There it was, the speech. And then, Talia will be taking over as Vice President of Operations effective immediately. I didn't flinch, not because I wasn't angry, but because I'd already started suspecting this. A few weeks ago, I noticed my permissions on Pulse had been reduced. It was subtle, just enough to remove my ability to approve back-end modifications, but not enough to raise alarms. A few files I'd created were moved into folders with admin tags I didn't recognize. Then came Leo, a fresh-faced analyst who asked too many questions, always took notes, and shadowed every team lead like he was writing a book titled, "How to Replace a Veteran Without Tipping Him Off." And now, here we were. Talia finally spoke. "I've reviewed your documentation, Evan," she said, like I was some intern she had been assigned to supervise. "Your infrastructure has served Greenwave well, but we believe it's time to streamline our tech stack and realign with modern methodologies." I tilted my head. "Such as?" She smiled tightly. "Decentralized, AI-driven decision support layers, modular data segmentation, platform-first logistics." I blinked. "That sounds like a LinkedIn post, not a plan." Martin chuckled nervously. "Let's keep this constructive." I nodded slowly. "Of course. What's the timeline for transition?" 2 weeks, Martin said. "We'd appreciate your cooperation. There's a generous exit package included. And we'd like you to help Talia get up to speed on anything not already documented." Not already documented. That phrasing stayed with me. Because here's the thing about systems like Pulse. The architecture can be mapped, sure. The dashboards can be explained. The API references can be copied. But the intuition, the logic behind the logic, that only lives in the person who built it. And they had just fired that person. I took the envelope from the table. Didn't open it. "Thank you," I said. Martin looked momentarily confused. Maybe he expected more resistance. Maybe he thought I'd argue, or beg, or accuse. But all I did was stand, nod once, and walk out. On the way down the elevator, I checked my phone. 3 unread emails. One from IT confirming my credential reassignment. One from HR about my transition checklist. One from Leo. "Hey Evan, could you send over the root access protocol for Pulse's task scheduler?" Couldn't find it in the Confluence wiki. "Thanks." I didn't reply. Back at my desk, the mood was oddly quiet. I sat down, opened a blank notepad, and stared. What now? I'd just been cut out of the very thing I built. Politely, professionally, like a part of the furniture that no longer matched the new color palette. But they weren't just moving forward. They were taking everything I created with them, and they expected me to smile while they did it. That evening, I stayed late. Again. Out of habit, maybe. Or maybe because leaving early felt like an admission that they were right. I walked the floor of our main server room. Each light blinked in rhythm, quiet, alive, methodical. I'd selected every drive array, built every connection, named every recovery node after jazz musicians. This wasn't just a system. It was a language. One they hadn't learned yet. And if they thought they could just inherit that fluency by scanning a few pages of documentation, they were in for a surprise. I opened Pulse's backend logs. 3 new user accounts had been created in the last 48 hours. All granted elevated access. One of them, tkemp_admin, had already viewed my system architecture maps, the forecasting model codebase, and my legacy compatibility modules. They were extracting me like a data dump, mining my knowledge before the lights went out. That's when I knew. This wasn't a transition. It was a takeover. I drove home in silence that night. No music. No podcasts. Just the sound of tires on asphalt and the memory of a glass conference room where 14 years of loyalty had been reduced to talking points. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just thought, if you're going to treat me like I never mattered, then I'm going to make you realize just how much I did. You can tell a lot about a company by how it handles your silence. After that meeting, I stopped offering opinions. I didn't attend strategy calls unless directly summoned. I stopped logging bugs in the central tracker. I stopped replying to Leo's just one more thing emails. And the interesting part? No one noticed. Or at least, they pretended not to. But Pulse noticed. It noticed when new users logged in and accessed high-security documentation at odd hours. It noticed when automation schedules were modified without proper syntax. It noticed when changes were pushed to production environments without regression tests. And it kept logs. Quietly, patiently, waiting for me to open them. One night, just before midnight, I sat on my couch with a laptop on my knees, coffee gone cold beside me, staring at access records for Pulse. One recurring IP address stood out: 10.14.5.112. It didn't belong to anyone on the ops team. I traced it back through our VLAN logs and found it was assigned to a guest port in the executive floor conference room. That's when the pattern hit me. The file requests were all clustered around 2 types of documents: Pulse System Architecture, and a lesser-known module I'd built 3 years ago called Pulse Predict, a forecasting engine that combined historic routing data, fuel costs, weather, and even regional holidays to predict delays. Only 4 people knew about that module. Now it was being studied in secret. I reached out to Darren Phillips, a network security consultant I had brought in years ago during a ransomware scare. He was smart, discreet, and owed me a favor. We met at a diner on the edge of town. The kind of place where no one asked questions if you ordered pancakes at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. I need intel, I said. Non-invasive. No hacking. Just open source research and corporate filings. He raised an eyebrow. On your own company? I nodded. I think we're being sold. 2 days later, Darren called me at 11:48 p.m. Zentrix Capital, he said. Out of Austin. Logistics-focused private equity. They've been circling mid-tier freight operations for the last 18 months. Greenwave's in late-stage acquisition talks. Not public yet, but I've seen the preliminary documents. I stood up from bed, wide awake. What's the valuation based on? I asked. There was a pause. Then he read. Company valuation is predicated on proprietary in-house routing engine, dynamic forecasting models, and adaptive logistics AI, all categorized under a singular operational platform referred to internally as Pulse. I didn't speak for a few seconds, because now it was clear. They weren't just replacing me. They were selling me. Darren continued. Documents suggest they're rushing the transition to show Zentrix that the new leadership team, aka Talia, is already running the tech. I laughed. Dry. Bitter. Running the tech, I repeated. She doesn't even know what a race condition is. He didn't laugh. They're trying to make Pulse look like a shared platform. No mention of individual attribution. Just internal innovation. They've removed your name from all documentation. I felt something deep in my chest tighten. It wasn't rage. It was resolve. The next morning, I opened a fireproof box in my closet and pulled out an old external drive. The kind you only use for things you never want connected to the cloud. Inside were the original Pulse source files. Pre-Greenwave. Dated. Archived. Labeled. I opened the folder titled Pulse_0.7_alpha. And there it was. Lines of code, design diagrams, and notes from the months before I ever signed an offer letter with Greenwave. I had proof. Pulse didn't begin at Greenwave. It began in my one-bedroom apartment in Newark. I emailed my attorney. Over the next 48 hours, we prepared provisional patents on 3 core technologies. The dynamic rerouting engine, the predictive delay module, the multi-node fallback logic. I didn't need to patent Pulse itself. That would have been too broad. But these 3 pillars made Pulse valuable, and without them, it was just a glorified task scheduler. I also reread my original employment agreement, and there it was, plain as day, Section 9C. Employee retains ownership over any code, framework, or technology developed prior to employment, provided said technology was not created on company time or with company resources. And Pulse was mine. By Friday, I had also made one final change. I logged into Pulse's private admin console, still accessible from a remote tunnel I'd quietly set up years ago, just in case. There, I updated the license verification protocol. I didn't lock the system. I didn't sabotage it. I simply added a single rule. If license validity equals false, enter sleep state. Resume upon re-verification. No damage. No loss. Just silence. Unless they talk to me. And the license would expire in exactly 7 days. I sat back in my chair, the final line of code still glowing on my screen, and whispered to myself, "You wanted the system without the man behind it. Let's see how far you get without the heartbeat." Monday, 9:17 a.m. That was the moment it all stopped. Not with a crash, not with an alert, but with a whisper. At exactly 9:17 a.m., the main server cluster running Pulse's routing engine entered sleep mode. By 9:19, the backup queues timed out. By 9:22, freight dispatches across 5 warehouse hubs paused. And at 9:30, a simple, unassuming message blinked on every operations screen. License expired. Please contact the developer to renew access. That's it. No red text. No angry error code. Just a truth they had chosen to ignore. Pulse wasn't theirs. And now it wasn't working. I was sitting on the balcony of a small cafe by the lake, sipping black coffee. My phone buzzed once, then twice, then 6 times in under a minute. I ignored all of them, until the 7th. Martin Kemp. I let it ring a few more times, then answered. His voice came in hot, tight with panic, smothered with forced calm. "Evan, we've got an issue. The system's down. Pulse isn't responding. Forecasts aren't updating. The warehouses are frozen. Do you know anything about this?" I looked out across the water, then said simply, "It's Monday, Martin. What the hell does that mean?" License expired. 7-day grace period ended at 9:17 this morning. Silence. Then, "You didn't renew it?" I smiled. "I didn't revoke it either. I just stopped giving away what I built for free." "You can't do this," he said. "You're holding us hostage." I kept my voice calm. "You signed away my name. You tried to sell my software without attribution. You scrubbed my involvement to make your daughter look competent. I'm not holding you hostage, Martin. You've been squatting. This could ruin the Zentrix deal. Then you should have thought of that before you stripped my access." He exhaled hard. "What do you want?" "I sent a licensing agreement to your legal department last week. Check your inbox." 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Diane from HR. She was polite, corporate, practiced. "We'd like to discuss the terms of your license proposal." "Sure," I said. "But just so you know, every hour that Pulse remains inactive is costing you about $20,000 in missed routing optimization. And that's a conservative estimate. We'd like to avoid escalation." "I'm not escalating anything. I'm protecting my IP. If you want Pulse back, all it takes is a signature." The next voice I heard was Talia's, joining the call. "We've already invested resources into adapting Pulse. You don't have the right to disrupt critical infrastructure." "I didn't disrupt it," I replied. "Your license expired. Pulse is doing exactly what it was programmed to do, respect its boundaries." She paused. "You'll never work in logistics again after this." I laughed softly. "We'll see." By noon, I received a DocuSign notification. Greenwave Logistics has signed the agreement. The terms were simple. Public recognition of my ownership of Pulse's core systems. a back pay for unlicensed usage over the past 5 years, an ongoing monthly licensing fee, and a non-disclosure clause about the nature of my departure. The payment hit my account by end of day. 7 figures. Clean. Final. Meanwhile, chaos brewed inside Greenwave. Zentrix's due diligence team had caught wind of the outage and put the acquisition on hold. The press release, which had already been drafted, was scrapped. Talia was removed from client-facing leadership within the week. Leo, the analyst who tried to clone my system, quietly left the company. Neolier, the shell consultancy they had planned to funnel Pulse through, was dissolved. And Martin? He stayed on as CEO. But his role was now purely symbolic. Zentrix had no interest in trusting him with anything technical, or strategic, or sensitive. He became a figurehead, a nameplate on a glass door. As for me, 3 days after the agreement was signed, I received a call from Zentrix Capital's VP of Operations. "We'd like to bring you on as a consultant," he said, "to lead the integration of Pulse into our broader logistics ecosystem. On your terms." The offer? Double my previous salary. Remote first. No internal politics. No Martin. No Talia. Just work that mattered and the respect I had earned. I said yes. The following week, I met with Vanessa, my former ops lead, for coffee. "How's Greenwave?" I asked. She shook her head. Quiet. Cold. "No one knows who's in charge anymore." "You staying?" "Not for long," she said, pulling out a flash drive. "By the way, I saved all your original version control backups. Just in case." I smiled. "You're a good person." "No," she said. "I just believe good people shouldn't be erased." I used my first consulting check to buy a cabin on a quiet lake 2 hours outside the city. No servers. No dashboards. Just a porch, a radio, and a sky that turned gold every morning. And every now and then, when I hear a freight truck rumble down the highway in the distance, I think, they thought the system was the code. But the system was me. Months passed. Greenwave was acquired by Zentrix as expected, but not at the premium Martin had hoped for. The final deal had been renegotiated to reflect unexpected risks in technology attribution, which was the polite way of saying, "You don't own the engine you bragged about." Talia's LinkedIn changed titles 3 times in as many weeks. Last I checked, she was exploring advisory opportunities in sustainable supply chain tech. She never mentioned Greenwave again. As for me, I was building something new. Not a system this time. A business. A team. A future I actually wanted. I called it Pulse Core Consulting. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to remind myself and everyone else that Pulse isn't just data or code. It's rhythm. It's trust. It's resilience. Within 3 months, Vanessa joined. Then Paul. Then Harpreet and Luis. Each one had seen what I built. Each one knew the truth. And none of them asked for titles. We worked quietly. We got results. And word spread. Clients who had once depended on Greenwave were now calling us directly. They didn't want bureaucracy. They wanted systems that worked and people who knew how to listen. One morning, about 9 months after the license expiration, I walked into a logistics technology summit in Chicago. It was strange. Being back in a room filled with the same energy I'd once tried to escape, the polished booths, the buzzwords floating in the air like perfume. The constant race to disrupt without actually understanding what was broken. I was scheduled to speak on a panel about digital resiliency. Before going on stage, I grabbed a coffee at the lobby bar. And that's where I saw him. Martin Kemp. He looked smaller. Not physically, but contained. As if the role he used to wear like armor had been stripped away. His suit was good but rumpled. His smile, tentative. For a moment, he looked like he might pretend he hadn't seen me. But then he walked over. "Evan," he said softly. I nodded. "Martin." He looked me in the eye. Really looked. "You won," he said. I didn't answer right away. I just took a sip of my coffee and let the moment breathe. Finally, I said, "It was never about winning." He waited, maybe expecting me to gloat. But I didn't. "It was about value," I continued. "About not letting someone else decide mine for me." Martin exhaled. "We made mistakes." I nodded. "You did. I thought you wouldn't fight back." "I didn't," I said. "I just protected what was mine." He looked away for a moment, then back. She wasn't ready, he admitted. Talia? He nodded. I wanted to believe she could grow into the role. She probably could have, I said, if she started by listening. He gave a thin smile. Well, he said, straightening his tie, I hope you're doing well. I didn't respond. Because I was. And he already knew that. He walked away. And I let him go without anger, without satisfaction, just a strange, quiet peace. Later that day, I stood on stage under soft lights, talking about what makes systems resilient. I told the audience it wasn't just about cloud backups or AI optimization. It was about people. People who show up every day. Who solve problems before they become emergencies. Who get taken for granted until they're gone. I didn't mention Pulse. I didn't mention Greenwave. But I saw the nods. I saw the understanding in people's faces. Because they'd all been there. Or knew someone who had. That night, I sat on the deck of my cabin by the lake. Watching the water shift gently under moonlight. No dashboards. No server logs. Just the steady pulse of crickets in the grass. And I thought about everything I'd lost. Everything I'd built. And everything I'd finally reclaimed. You don't need to destroy something to prove you mattered. Sometimes the best revenge is simply reminding the world quietly, confidently, and completely that you were the one who made it work all along. They replaced him thinking they could keep the system. But they forgot one thing. A system is only as strong as the one who understands its heart. And Evan Ross? He was the heart all along. What do you think? Should Evan have burned it all down, or was this the perfect revenge? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you love stories where the underestimated rise quietly and take everything back with grace, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next episode. Goodbye, my dear friends.